The windage calculation was wrong. The range cards didn't match the terrain. Half the instructors insisted the target was at 800 meters. The other half swore it was closer to 650. The ballistic computer kept cycling through the same faulty data. Morning haze rolled across the valley floor, thick enough to distort heat signatures and bend light through the scope. The rangemaster called for a ceasefire. Equipment was recalibrated. Voices rose in frustration. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Specialist Elena Vasquez didn't argue. She lay prone behind her rifle, pressed her cheek against the stock, and felt the rhythm of her own heartbeat through the bipod legs. The target was there, somewhere beyond the shimmer. She had seen it once through a brief gap in the haze. That glimpse was enough. The valley didn't care about range cards or ballistic computers, or what the instructors thought they knew about distance. It held its secrets in thermals and wind patterns that shifted with every degree the sun climbed. Specialist Elena Vasquez breathed through it without comment. Her uniform was damp with morning dew, her shooting gloves sticky with perspiration, and her ammunition pouch secured tighter than regulation demanded. Charlie Company's advanced marksmanship course had begun their final qualification at dawn, after 3 weeks of intensive training. A thermal anomaly in the valley floor had scrambled the laser rangefinders without warning. The established firing positions that were supposed to provide clean sight lines to the qualification targets had been compromised by atmospheric distortion. The path that should have led to successful completion had dissolved into guesswork and mechanical failure. Digital range displays continued to show optimal firing solutions. On the line, the shots weren't connecting. The computerized scopes, synchronized across the firing positions, kept blinking false readings, insisting the environmental data was still reliable. Staff Sergeant Morrison tried to reorient the class by pulling them back to basic manual calculations, relying on the same compromised instruments that had failed twice already. When the equipment failed to provide accurate data again, it was Corporal Hayes who turned toward the group and made his frustration clear. He gestured with his shooting glove toward Elena's position and said, "She's been writing in that notebook again. Maybe all that emotional stuff is throwing off her concentration." Elena didn't respond. Her grip tightened slightly on the waterproof cover of the data book tucked against her chest plate, but her expression remained neutral. She had been recording environmental observations for 2 weeks, noting wind patterns by watching grass movement and thermal shifts by observing mirage behavior through her scope. It wasn't part of the curriculum. No one had asked for it, but she documented it anyway, logged in precise handwriting with timestamps and weather conditions. She had no reason to believe anyone had reviewed her notes. The firing line was beginning to split between following the digital readout. The windage calculation was wrong. The range cards didn't match the terrain. Half the instructors insisted the target was at 800 meters. The other half swore it was closer to 650. The ballistic computer kept cycling through the same faulty data. Morning haze rolled across the valley floor, thick enough to distort heat signatures and bend light through the scope. The rangemaster called for a ceasefire. Equipment was recalibrated. Voices rose in frustration. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Specialist Elena Vasquez didn't argue. She lay prone behind her rifle, pressed her cheek against the stock, and felt the rhythm of her own heartbeat through the bipod legs. The target was there, somewhere beyond the shimmer. She had seen it once through a brief gap in the haze. That glimpse was enough. The valley didn't care about range cards or ballistic computers or what the instructors thought they knew about distance. It held its secrets in thermals and wind patterns that shifted with every degree the sun climbed. Specialist Elena Vasquez breathed through it without comment. Her uniform was damp with morning dew, her shooting gloves sticky with perspiration, and her ammunition pouch secured tighter than regulation demanded. Charlie Company's advanced marksmanship course had begun their final qualification at dawn after 3 weeks of intensive training. A thermal anomaly in the valley floor had scrambled the laser rangefinders without warning. The established firing positions that were supposed to provide clean sight lines to the qualification targets had been compromised by atmospheric distortion. The path that should have led to successful completion had dissolved into guesswork and mechanical failure. Digital range displays continued to show optimal firing solutions. On the line, the shots weren't connecting. The computerized scopes, synchronized across the firing positions, kept blinking false readings, insisting the environmental data was still reliable. Staff Sergeant Morrison tried to reorient the class by pulling them back to basic manual calculations, relying on the same compromised instruments that had failed twice already. When the equipment failed to provide accurate data again, it was Corporal Haze who turned toward the group and made his frustration clear. He gestured with his shooting glove toward Elena's position and said, "She's been writing in that notebook again. Maybe all that emotional stuff is throwing off her concentration." Elena didn't respond. Her grip tightened slightly on the waterproof cover of the data book tucked against her chest plate, but her expression remained neutral. She had been recording environmental observations for 2 weeks, noting wind patterns by watching grass movement and thermal shifts by observing mirage behavior through her scope. It wasn't part of the curriculum. No one had asked for it, but she documented it anyway, logged in precise handwriting with timestamps and weather conditions. She had no reason to believe anyone had reviewed her notes. The firing line was beginning to split between following the digital readouts and trusting their instincts. The ANPVS 10-day night scope was struggling to maintain target acquisition through the atmospheric interference. Every time the system locked onto what appeared to be the target, the image wavered and lost resolution. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez tried repositioning the spotting scope higher on the observation platform, adjusting angles while squinting through eyepieces fogged with condensation. His voice carried that familiar edge of determination, as if elevation might solve everything. It didn't. The valley didn't care about technical solutions. The qualification range pressed in around them. The morning air had thickened as humidity climbed, turning visibility inconsistent and unreliable. Boots shifted on shooting mats, slick with moisture from overnight condensation. Private Castellanos, already struggling with scope alignment, was starting to show signs of frustration. Elena checked his breathing technique with a quiet observation and wordlessly demonstrated proper trigger control. She glanced at one of the digital displays. The environmental readings had drifted again, this time showing wind speeds that contradicted what she could see in the grass beyond the targets. Her hand moved instinctively to the notebook pressed against her gear. Those wind pattern observations from yesterday morning, she remembered them. She remembered the way the air moved differently at 200-meter intervals, and how the thermals created microclimates that shifted with the sun's angle. Her notes still recorded those patterns. The computer displays did not. Staff Sergeant Morrison raised his hand to halt the exercise. His voice carried authority, but tension underneath. "Let's hold fire until we get verified environmental data from range control that matches current conditions." "Understood." He looked at Elena for a moment longer than necessary. It wasn't a direct criticism, but it wasn't neutral either. "Focus on the fundamentals, specialist." Elena gave a single nod. Challenging instructors didn't work. Not during qualification, not when careers hung in the balance. The chain of command was absolute. She turned her attention back to her rifle and began cleaning the scope lens, ignoring the way Haze shook his head behind her back. They regrouped beneath a canvas shelter erected beside the equipment trailer, crouched around malfunctioning range-finding devices, while Morrison and Rodriguez took turns, cycling through diagnostic procedures. The control panel blinked amber warnings repeatedly. One shooter poured water over the back of his neck to combat the rising heat. Another stared at the target area, trying to reconcile what his eyes told him with what the instruments insisted. No one asked to see Elena's environmental notes. The morning had turned quiet except for the distant sound of other firing ranges operating normally. Elena tilted her head slightly. She studied the heat waves rising from the asphalt road that bordered the range, the kind that danced before atmospheric conditions created optical illusions. Her fingers traced the edge of her notebook. The water-stained corner still held creases from where she'd balanced it on her knee while lying prone during a practice session 2 days earlier. She'd recorded wind direction changes by watching dust patterns kick up from vehicle traffic. No one had been observing her methods. Someone made a joke about female soldiers keeping diaries instead of focusing on marksmanship. Laughter followed, sharp but brief. No one corrected the comment, not even Morrison. Elena opened her notebook to a blank page and began sketching the target area layout from memory. She kept her body positioned to block the glare from her paper. Her pencil was streaked with gun oil and dust, Her notebook remained tucked against her chest when not in use, unread and unacknowledged. No one had to understand her methods. They would still prove accurate. Heat built throughout the morning and refused to break. It came in waves at first, then settled into a constant oppressive presence that clung to every surface and blurred the edges of everything beyond 400 meters. By midday, the atmospheric distortion was thick enough to make the qualification targets appear to float and shift position. The temperature gauge read 98 degrees Fahrenheit, but sweat had nowhere to go in the humid air. It collected under gear, soaked into uniforms, and fogged protective eyewear that hadn't been dry since the exercise began. They had nowhere to go. The qualification had to be completed. The equipment was still providing inconsistent data. One scope insisted they were aiming at targets that didn't exist in those positions. Another displayed range information that placed obstacles where there was only empty ground. Morale dropped with each failed shot. Conversation stopped, then attempts at humor stopped, then communication altogether. Elena stayed near her assigned firing position, adjusting her bipod legs when the ground became too soft from morning dew, and checking her rifle's zero in the poor visibility beneath the canvas shelter. The company's top shooter, Sergeant Jackson, had gone down with heat exhaustion on day 2 of the course. His qualification slot was empty, his rifle secured in the armory, wrapped in a protective case and braced against disappointment that no medevac could cure. No one had heard anything from the medical team since the initial transport. The radio antenna stayed pointed toward the base, flashing a status light at intervals like a beacon too uncertain to admit it meant nothing. Most of the shooters had given up checking their digital displays. The environmental readings no longer matched the conditions. The computerized firing solutions froze during calculation cycles. One soldier shook his device until the screen went dark. Another pulled his boonie hat over his eyes and stared at nothing, his focus lost somewhere beyond the heat waves. Elena didn't comment on the frustration. She had stopped trusting those readouts the day after the first equipment malfunction. Instead, she kept her notebook secured in a waterproof pouch she had fashioned from a medical supply wrapper. The pencil marks bled slightly anyway, smudging where moisture had penetrated the seal, but the observations were still legible. She waited until most of the class was occupied with equipment maintenance that evening, gathered around cleaning stations with rifles disassembled and attention focused on technical procedures. Then she pulled out her notes and knelt beside a section of concrete beside the equipment trailer. Using a mechanical pencil with a fine lead, she sketched the outlines of wind patterns she had observed and recorded over the past several days. The thermal layer boundaries, the microclimate zones, the elevation changes that affected bullet trajectory in ways no computer had calculated. She adjusted each notation based on what she had witnessed, since no instrument could have measured it accurately. The atmosphere was a living system that changed with temperature, humidity, and time of day. Corporal Martinez stirred nearby. He had been struggling with trigger control and dealing with scope bite from improper shooting form. His voice came quietly, but with an edge of skepticism. "Still drawing pictures, Vasquez? You trying to turn this into art class?" Elena didn't answer immediately. She kept sketching. When she looked up, her expression was unreadable. "I'm tracking conditions the computers miss. Wind patterns, thermal layers, how light bends at different times." He grunted, then turned away with a comment about feelings and physics not mixing. She let it pass. She always did. The qualification standards were stricter than they had been 2 weeks ago. The atmospheric conditions still shifted with every small change in temperature and humidity. Elena had started documenting those changes, noting the time intervals between thermal shifts and the types of mirage distortions that followed. She had recorded 3 wind pattern changes that appeared in no official weather data, and 2 thermal inversion layers that were active despite showing up as normal atmospheric conditions. The instruments were providing information, but the valley wasn't cooperating with their assumptions. It was communicating the truth through heat shimmer and air movement and the behavior of dust particles in the wind. She was learning to read those signals. At midday, a student returned from the 600-meter line with no successful hits and visible frustration creasing his face. The atmospheric distortion was worse than expected. The environmental readings had placed conditions within normal parameters. He walked back in silence, his rifle slung, and his confidence shaken. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. No one criticized him. They had all started to recognize something was wrong with their approach. The heat index climbed higher. Clouds of dust hung in the air, windless and choking. The atmosphere smelled of hot metal and dry earth. The sound of distant gunfire from other ranges seemed muffled, quieter in places it should have been sharp. Elena watched the others react to the frustration. Some soldiers cursed at their equipment and adjusted settings repeatedly. Others stared at their targets through scopes, waiting for conditions that might never improve. The way people wait when they're hoping technology will eventually provide the solution. That night, she completed a detailed atmospheric analysis and labeled the thermal pattern she believed would be most stable during the next morning's qualification attempt. She had observed similar conditions during an early morning practice session. She remembered the exact way the air moved differently then. The pencil lead broke where her hand had pressed too hard against the paper. She sharpened it with a field knife, folded the sheet carefully, slid it back into the waterproof pouch, and secured it behind her ammunition magazines. Private Castellanos coughed somewhere behind her in the darkness. She checked his shooting position without speaking, still struggling with fundamentals, but improving. She adjusted his rifle sling, then sat back and listened to the night sounds of the base. Somewhere beyond the range, the qualification target still waited in the darkness. She remembered the way morning light would hit them at exactly 0730 hours. She remembered the precise angle that would eliminate scope glare. She knew the distance, even if the computers disagreed. The qualification didn't offer second chances. It offered one opportunity to demonstrate competency, and that was exactly what began slipping away by the fourth day of the course. The shooter's performance grew less consistent. Attempts to compensate for environmental conditions created overcorrections that missed targets entirely. Frustration simmered beneath professional composure. Voices became shorter and sharper. No one discussed the fact that the electronic systems continued to malfunction, but the tension was visible in every movement and adjustment. The chain of command maintained strict standards, but authority belonged to whoever could deliver results, not who had the most advanced equipment. Elena didn't argue with procedures or question the curriculum. She never did. But she was approaching the challenge differently now. At night, she stayed alert after others settled into their sleeping bags. Using a red-filtered flashlight clipped to her gear, she unfolded the latest observations from her notebook and worked from memory and environmental awareness. She used precise pencil marks to chart potential atmospheric windows when thermal conditions might stabilize enough for accurate long-range shooting. The qualification target she had studied existed in a specific location, but it would be challenging to acquire through atmospheric distortion. The sight picture she remembered required compensation for multiple environmental factors that shifted throughout the day. It was demanding, unpredictable, and invisible to electronic sensors. Her notebook was marked with graphite smears and small tears along the edges from field use she hadn't reported. Each observation she recorded was methodical, based on direct environmental assessment, layered with marginal notes about temperature variations and humidity changes. She wrapped each page in the same piece of plastic she had been protecting since day one. The waterproof seal was still intact. The qualification attempts were failing. The latest session had ended with missed shots and equipment malfunctions. A targeting laser that should have provided range confirmation instead reflected off atmospheric moisture and gave false readings. Two shooters had to start over completely when their scopes lost zero due to thermal expansion. Castellanos' confidence had cracked under pressure. The heat was still oppressive, over 95 degrees with no wind to provide relief, while ammunition supplies dwindled and equipment overheated repeatedly. Tempers flared. Morrison tried to maintain morale with encouragement, but no one was performing at qualification standards. He hadn't seen improvement in any area they hadn't already addressed through standard training methods. Elena kept working. She didn't request additional instruction. She marked environmental patterns, adjusted her shooting position to account for the thermal effects she anticipated, and prepared her equipment according to the conditions she expected rather than what the instruments reported. Then she waited, not for official approval of her methods, but for the qualification attempt she knew was coming. Rodriguez found her lying prone beside the firing line before dawn, checking her scope's eye relief one final time. He had been quiet since the second day, mostly handling administrative duties and assisting with equipment maintenance. He knelt beside her without asking permission. After a minute of observing her preparation routine, he said, "If you think you can make the shot when everyone else is missing, I'll spot for you." She didn't look away from her rifle immediately. Then she nodded once and pulled the plastic wrap from her notebook. "It's not in the computer's environmental database, but I've tracked the thermal patterns. The air moves differently here at dawn." "Copy that," he said. "Then we follow your lead." No formal announcement followed. No briefing to the rest of the class. Elena simply prepared her gear, secured her notes, and adjusted her shooting position to account for the atmospheric conditions she had studied. By first light, she and Rodriguez were occupying the qualification firing position, with her rifle zeroed according to her environmental calculations rather than the digital recommendations, moving slowly through her pre-shot routine while others waited for electronic systems to stabilize. The method she employed wasn't documented in the training manual, but it was consistent with everything she had observed and recorded. Every environmental factor had been noted, every atmospheric variable accounted for through direct observation rather than electronic measurement. She followed her own data systematically. Every 50 meters of range, she had made detailed notes about how conditions changed, not with electronic flags or digital markers, but with pencil observations pressed into notebook pages and secured with paracord to keep them accessible. She used environmental awareness wrapped in practical shooting technique to maintain accuracy. The notes contained information like thermal layer density, wind pattern changes, and light refraction angles. Rodriguez never questioned her methods or asked for technical explanations. By the time the qualification target became visible through the morning haze, the atmospheric window she had predicted began to open. Brief moments of stability appeared between thermal layers, exactly as her notebook had indicated. Her observations showed atmospheric conditions pinching together before clearing near optimal shooting time. That moment when it actually occurred, when the heat shimmer settled and the target became sharp and clear through her scope, felt like validation. She didn't celebrate. She simply controlled her breathing and began her shooting sequence. Then she guided her crosshairs to the target and made the shot that would change everything. By the time the other students began their qualification attempts, following the standard electronic firing solutions that continued to malfunction, no one questioned Elena's methods. The target downrange bore evidence of her accuracy. Castellanos had stabilized his performance. The electronic systems had stopped providing conflicting information. Elena didn't lead through rank or volume. She didn't request recognition or demand changes to the curriculum. She simply demonstrated competency with her rifle and her understanding of environmental conditions sealed in her notebook. What followed wasn't command authority. It was professional respect earned through results rather than rhetoric. The final qualification day brought no relief from heat or humidity. The valley maintained its oppressive atmosphere, but the moisture felt different now. Everything remained challenging. Hands slippery with perspiration, equipment hot to the touch, and thoughts clouded by the physical demands of precision shooting. The atmospheric conditions held thick and unpredictable, making target acquisition difficult except in brief windows between thermal layers. Elena used those windows. She moved with deliberate patience, her rifle positioned according to environmental factors she tested with methods that had nothing to do with electronic measurement. She didn't trust atmospheric readings that looked stable. Not here. Not anymore. Every few minutes, she paused to assess thermal shimmer intensity with observations that couldn't be quantified by instruments. Her shooting position was marked with reference points she had established using her notebook rather than digital aids. With no reliable electronic environmental data, she relied on direct observation instead, timing her shots according to atmospheric patterns she had learned through patient study. The qualification course they faced wasn't covered in any training manual, but her notes showed the conditions cycling predictably where the heat distortion broke apart, and it did. Behind her, Rodriguez served as spotter, his observations measured and professional, his attention focused ahead. At one point, he asked without doubt in his voice, "What's the wind call?" Elena made a minor adjustment based on grass movement she had been watching. Then they continued their qualification sequence. They completed the course requirements in atmospheric conditions that had defeated electronic measurement systems. Elena knelt and tested the ground temperature with her hand. Hot concrete and superheated metal. Dangerous for sustained contact. She warned others in clear, brief phrases. Equipment's overheating. Let barrels cool between strings. They proceeded anyway. Midway through the final qualification sequence, one student's scope lost 0 due to thermal expansion. Elena dropped her rifle sling, fastened her cleaning rod to her gear, and helped him re-establish his sight alignment. She maintained a low profile, focused on the task, the weight of responsibility spreading across her shoulders as she steadied the other shooter's confidence. The cleaning rod held firm, providing a stable reference point. Then the scope settled, and the student regained his 0. She didn't speak about technique or theory. She just returned to her position, reattached her gear, and continued shooting. They moved through the final qualification stage with rotating responsibilities. Elena maintained her shooting rhythm, while others provided support. She used observation techniques that had taken weeks to develop and applied them under pressure that tested every aspect of her preparation. Her shooting position was marked with environmental reference points measured in pencil sketches rather than digital coordinates. She tied nothing to equipment that might fail, just forward planning based on atmospheric study and direct environmental assessment. Elena rationed the last energy bar she had saved, wrapped in medical tape and carried since the course began. She pressed it between her teeth while lying prone behind her rifle. Her eyes stayed focused downrange. Her shooting glove was worn thin from gripping the rifle stock for extended periods. She didn't loosen her boots or adjust her gear unnecessarily. Rodriguez brought her a water bottle and positioned himself at the spotting scope. He didn't offer conversation. He just looked downrange toward the qualification targets. His rifle rested across his pack, ready for his own shooting sequence. Then, quietly, he asked how much time remained in the qualification window. She checked the angle of sunlight hitting the target area and said, 20 minutes before thermal distortion gets worse. He nodded and said, understood. At one point during the final sequence, they encountered atmospheric distortion that wasn't predicted by any environmental forecast, but Elena had observed it before, during her practice sessions. She had documented the exact time it occurred and how long it lasted. The thermal layer that created shooting difficulties was supposed to be minimal according to weather data, but she knew it would peak at exactly this time of day. She timed her shots to work around it. The student who had questioned her notebook methods earlier pointed at his electronic rangefinder and said it showed optimal conditions for shooting. Elena looked at him, then demonstrated her shot placement through the distortion he couldn't see. She stepped back and told them the electronic reading was measuring conditions 200 meters away from the actual target area. The sensor he was trusting was positioned incorrectly for their firing position. The student didn't argue further. That afternoon, the atmospheric conditions changed exactly as Elena had predicted. The thermal layers shifted from horizontal distortion to vertical columns. The electronic sensors that had remained inaccurate continued to report normal atmospheric conditions. Elena looked upward and noted that conditions were becoming more favorable for qualification completion. She adjusted her equipment for the final qualification sequence and prepared to demonstrate the marksmanship skills she had developed through methodical environmental study. They approached the final shooting position before the qualification window closed. Elena signaled the spotter to maintain observation, then moved forward alone through heat shimmer and atmospheric distortion. When she reached her final firing position, she stopped and established her shooting platform. It was stable, properly supported, and positioned for optimal sight alignment, despite environmental challenges. She settled behind her rifle, adjusting for the atmospheric conditions she had studied. The qualification targets appeared intermittently through thermal layers, but Elena had learned to recognize the windows when they became clear and steady. She sat back on her heels, watching the heat shimmer patterns. Then she returned to her rifle and signaled Rodriguez that she was ready for the final qualification sequence. The other students maintained their positions nearby, observing her technique and waiting for their own attempts. No one offered commentary or advice. They simply watched and prepared for their own qualification challenges. The heat was still oppressive, and the atmospheric distortion remained problematic, but Elena had learned to work within those constraints rather than against them. The qualification targets sat at precisely measured distances, clearly marked but partially obscured by environmental conditions that changed throughout the day. The electronic systems continued to provide information that didn't match observed conditions. Elena crouched, checked her notebook one final time, and confirmed her environmental calculations. The thermal patterns matched her predictions exactly. This time, conditions were optimal for accurate shooting. The qualification course was unforgiving, demanding precision under adverse environmental conditions. But the shooting positions provided adequate stability for competent marksmen who understood the challenges. The atmospheric distortion moved predictably. Not completely, but enough. Elena had learned its patterns. The qualification targets were visible when thermal conditions allowed. The sun wasn't directly overhead, but the light angle had shifted to reduce scope glare according to her timing calculations. The valley around them maintained its oppressive heat, but the air movement had organized into patterns she recognized from her observations. It was the opportunity she had prepared for through weeks of environmental study. Elena walked the length of her shooting position methodically, her boots finding stable contact points on ground she had tested for firmness and reliability. The sun had climbed higher, but the horizon maintained the clear definition she needed for accurate range estimation. The atmospheric distortion behind them remained problematic. The other students were positioned according to their assigned firing points, gear organized efficiently, and attention focused on their own qualification requirements. They had no energy left for ceremony, just the gravity of professional competency testing under challenging conditions. She checked her rifle 0 one final time, using methods that relied on direct observation rather than electronic confirmation. Using her cleaning rod as a reference, she verified that her scope alignment hadn't shifted due to thermal expansion of the rifle's metal components. The first check confirmed proper alignment. The next verified that her ammunition was loaded consistently. She marked the final reference point with her pencil, writing coordinates directly onto her shooting mat. Rodriguez was positioned at the spotting scope, adjusting its focus for the atmospheric conditions and ensuring clear target observation despite thermal distortion. He didn't ask about her preparation routine. He just confirmed, "Ready when you are." She nodded and moved into her shooting position, pulling her notebook from its protective pouch. The cover was battered from field use. The pages showed wear from repeated handling. The environmental data was still legible despite the challenging conditions she had worked in, but the atmospheric analysis was accurate. The qualification target was marked by coordinates she had calculated through direct observation and verified through repeated study. Rodriguez glanced at her notes, then returned his attention to the spotting scope. His voice carried calm professionalism. "This is final qualification. Target confirmed at designated range. Environmental conditions within your parameters." He turned to Elena and waited for her response. She read from her notebook, her finger tracing the wind direction analysis as she spoke. The atmospheric data was not derived from electronic sensors. It was based on direct environmental observation, thermal layer mapping documented through careful study over multiple days. She had recorded conditions by hand, week by week, from patience and systematic environmental awareness. She keyed her shooting sequence according to the environmental window she had identified. Her notebook was not an official document. It was personal environmental intelligence that had proven more reliable than the electronic systems everyone else depended on. The qualification targets were positioned at standard distances, clearly defined when atmospheric conditions allowed proper visibility. At first, they appeared distorted by thermal layers. Then the environmental factors Elena had been tracking aligned exactly as her notebook had predicted. The heat shimmer organized itself into recognizable patterns. The atmospheric distortion lifted gradually, creating the clear shooting window she had been waiting for. The targets became sharp and defined through her rifle scope. The sun reached the optimal angle for her sight picture. Thermal layers settled into the stability her observations had shown was possible. From her prone position, the shooting solution was clear and achievable. As the environmental conditions reached optimal parameters, Elena looked across her rifle scope at the qualification target that would determine her future in advanced marksmanship training. The target appeared crisp and steady. The atmospheric window was open exactly as her environmental calculations had predicted. Rodriguez maintained his spotting scope observation and said quietly, "Target clear. Wind minimal. Atmospheric conditions stable." Elena settled her breathing, aligned her sight picture, and prepared to demonstrate the shooting skills she had developed through methodical preparation and environmental study that no electronic system had been able to provide. When the moment came, she made the shot with confidence earned through weeks of careful observation and disciplined preparation. The target downrange confirmed her accuracy. Her environmental analysis had been correct. Her shooting technique was sound under challenging atmospheric conditions that had defeated electronic measurement systems and frustrated other students throughout the qualification course. The impact was clean. Center mass, 847 meters in conditions that had been defeating shooters all week. The spotting scope confirmed what the naked eye could already see. A perfect hit on a qualification target that had seemed impossible to reach through the atmospheric distortion that morning. Rodriguez called the shot without emotion. Hit. Dead center. Qualification complete. But it wasn't just the accuracy that silenced the firing line. It was the method. While other students had been struggling with electronic systems that provided conflicting environmental data, Elena had been quietly developing an approach that worked when technology failed. Her notebook contained 3 weeks of handwritten atmospheric observations that had proven more reliable than any digital weather station. Staff Sergeant Morrison walked downrange to confirm the target personally. The hole was exactly where it needed to be, punched clean through the scoring rings with precision that left no doubt about competency. When he returned to the firing line, his expression carried a mixture of surprise and professional acknowledgement. Outstanding marksmanship, Specialist Vasquez. That was a difficult shot under challenging conditions. The other students gathered around the spotting scope, taking turns to verify what Elena had accomplished. The atmospheric conditions that had been causing missed shots and frustration all morning were the same conditions she had learned to work within rather than against. Her approach hadn't been louder or more aggressive than anyone else's. It had simply been more thorough. Corporal Haze, who had questioned her methods repeatedly throughout the course, stood quietly beside his own rifle and observed Elena's shooting position. Her notebook was still open beside her rifle, filled with environmental data that had guided her shot placement. The pencil sketches and handwritten observations looked unprofessional compared to the electronic systems everyone else was using, but the results spoke with authority that couldn't be argued. Private Castellanos approached Elena while she was securing her rifle for transport back to the armory. His voice carried genuine curiosity rather than skepticism. "How did you know the thermal conditions would clear at exactly that time?" Elena looked up from her equipment organization and gave a response that was both simple and comprehensive. "I watched the patterns for 3 weeks, wrote down what I saw. Heat moves the same way every morning when humidity drops." She didn't elaborate about the hours she had spent observing atmospheric behavior, while others were focused on equipment maintenance and technical procedures. She didn't explain the systematic approach she had used to document environmental factors that electronic sensors couldn't measure accurately. She just continued preparing her gear for transport and said, "The valley tells you what it's doing if you pay attention." Rodriguez had been listening to the conversation while cleaning his spotting scope. He packed his equipment methodically, then commented without looking up from his work. 3 weeks of hand observations beat $3,000 of electronic weather instruments. That's something to remember. He shouldered his pack and walked toward the equipment trailer, leaving Elena to finish her own preparation routine. The qualification results were posted that afternoon. Elena's score was listed at the top of the class rankings, followed by detailed accuracy measurements that confirmed her performance under the most challenging atmospheric conditions of the entire course. But the numbers only told part of the story. The complete picture included her approach to environmental analysis and her willingness to trust direct observation over electronic systems when those systems provided unreliable information. Morrison scheduled individual performance reviews with each student before the course conclusion. When Elena reported to his office, she found him studying her notebook, which had been submitted along with her qualification documentation. The pages were filled with atmospheric observations, wind pattern analyses, and thermal layer mapping that represented weeks of systematic environmental study. "This is impressive work, Specialist," Morrison said, looking up from the handwritten data. "More detailed than anything our electronic systems provided. More accurate, too." He closed the notebook and leaned back in his chair. "The question is whether you can teach other people to do what you did out there. Because what you accomplished today is exactly what we need our advanced marksmen to be capable of." Elena's response was direct. "Environmental awareness isn't complicated. It just takes time and attention. Most people trust their instruments instead of their observations." She paused, then added, "The instruments are useful when they work correctly. When they don't, You need another approach. Morrison nodded and made notes on her performance evaluation. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, covering technical aspects of her environmental analysis methods and discussing potential applications for advanced sniper training programs. Elena answered questions about her observation techniques and explained how she had developed systematic approaches to atmospheric assessment that didn't depend on electronic measurement devices. When the meeting concluded, Morrison's final comment carried professional recognition that extended beyond the immediate qualification results. You've demonstrated something important here, Specialist Vasquez. Advanced marksmanship isn't just about shooting skills. It's about understanding the environment you're operating in and adapting to conditions that can't always be predicted by technology. 3 days later, Elena received orders assigning her to the advanced sniper course at Fort Moore, along with a recommendation for specialized training in environmental analysis and long-range shooting instruction. The paperwork included a note from Morrison explaining that her qualification performance had demonstrated exactly the kind of analytical thinking and practical competency the program was designed to develop. Rodriguez also received advanced training orders, along with recognition for his work as a spotter during challenging atmospheric conditions. The two of them had functioned as an effective team during the qualification exercise, with Elena providing environmental analysis and shooting skills, while Rodriguez contributed observation and tactical support. The other students completed their own qualification attempts over the following days, as atmospheric conditions continued to challenge electronic systems and require adaptive approaches to environmental assessment. Some succeeded by learning to incorporate direct observation with their electronic tools. Others struggled with conditions that remained unpredictable, despite technological assistance. Elena spent her final week at the training facility helping other students develop environmental awareness skills that complemented their existing marksmanship abilities. She demonstrated observation techniques for reading thermal conditions and wind patterns that couldn't be measured by instruments. Her notebook became a reference document that illustrated systematic approaches to atmospheric analysis under field conditions. The impact of her qualification performance extended beyond individual recognition. The training program began incorporating environmental observation techniques into the standard curriculum, acknowledging that electronic systems had limitations that required supplementary approaches when conditions became challenging. Elena's methods were integrated into the course instruction as practical skills that enhanced rather than replaced technological capabilities. Her notebook observations became examples of systematic environmental analysis that students could learn to apply in situations where electronic systems provided unreliable data. 6 months later, Elena was serving as an instructor at the advanced sniper course, teaching environmental analysis techniques to students who faced the same atmospheric challenges that had once frustrated an entire qualification class. Her approach emphasized direct observation skills that worked in conjunction with electronic systems to provide comprehensive environmental awareness. The training facility had updated its curriculum to include systematic observation methods alongside traditional marksmanship instruction. Elena's environmental analysis techniques were now part of the standard program, helping students develop skills that functioned reliably when technological solutions encountered limitations. Rodriguez served as her assistant instructor, providing spotting expertise and tactical knowledge that complemented Elena's environmental analysis capabilities. Together, they developed training methods that prepared students for challenging conditions that couldn't be predicted or measured by instruments alone. The electronic weather systems remained part of the training program, providing valuable data when atmospheric conditions allowed accurate measurement. But students also learned to recognize when those systems encountered limitations and how to supplement technological information with direct environmental observation that provided reliable alternatives. Elena's notebook had evolved into a comprehensive training manual that documented environmental analysis techniques applicable to various atmospheric conditions and geographic locations. Her systematic approach to observation and documentation became a model for developing environmental awareness skills that enhanced marksmanship performance under challenging conditions. The qualification shot that had demonstrated her competency under adverse atmospheric conditions became an example of what was possible when systematic preparation met challenging environmental circumstances. Her accuracy hadn't been the result of superior equipment or favorable conditions. It had, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow been the product of methodical environmental study and disciplined shooting technique that functioned reliably when other approaches failed. Students who completed the updated training program carried Elena's environmental analysis methods with them to operational assignments around the world, applying systematic observation techniques in diverse atmospheric conditions that electronic systems couldn't always measure accurately. Her influence extended far beyond the single qualification shot that had initially demonstrated her capabilities. The training facility continued to use Elena's methods as standard instruction, acknowledging that environmental awareness was an essential component of advanced marksmanship that required both technological tools and direct observation skills. Her approach had proven that systematic environmental analysis could provide reliable information when electronic systems encountered limitations or provided conflicting data. Elena's story became part of the training program's instructional history, illustrating how individual initiative and systematic preparation could overcome technological limitations and achieve results that seemed impossible under challenging conditions. Her qualification performance remained an example of what dedicated environmental study could accomplish when applied with discipline and precision. Years later, Elena's environmental analysis techniques were being used by Advance. The message arrived at 0347 hours on a Tuesday morning when the forward operating base was still wrapped in pre-dawn darkness. Elena was already awake, sitting on the edge of her cot with her rifle disassembled for routine maintenance. The cleaning rod moved through the barrel with mechanical precision while her mind processed the atmospheric conditions she could sense through the tent walls. Humidity was building. Wind patterns had shifted during the night. The morning would bring challenges that required more than standard equipment to overcome. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez knocked twice on the tent frame before entering with a sealed envelope marked with operational security classifications. His expression carried the weight of information that would change everything about their current assignment. "We've got movement," he said, settling onto the ammunition crate that served as their planning table. "High-value target. Long-range interdiction. Atmospheric conditions are going to be problematic." Elena continued cleaning her rifle while Rodriguez spread topographical maps across the crate's surface. The target zone was marked in red, positioned in mountainous terrain that created its own weather patterns and challenged electronic surveillance systems. Intelligence reports indicated the target would be moving through a specific corridor at a predetermined time, but atmospheric interference had been preventing accurate observation and range confirmation. "Electronic systems can't get reliable data," Rodriguez continued, pointing to weather reports that showed conflicting information from multiple sources. "Thermal imaging is compromised. Laser rangefinders are giving false readings. Traditional spotting methods aren't working because visibility changes every few minutes." He looked at Elena's cleaning routine and added, "This is exactly the kind of situation where your environmental analysis becomes mission critical." Elena finished reassembling her rifle and secured it in the cleaning cradle. She pulled her field notebook from its protective case and opened it to pages filled with regional atmospheric observations she had been collecting since their arrival at the forward operating base. Mountain weather patterns, thermal layer behavior, wind tunnel effects created by specific topographical features. 3 weeks of systematic environmental documentation that might determine the success or failure of their mission. "The target zone sits in a valley that creates its own microclimate," she said, tracing geographical features on the map with her finger. "Electronic systems read atmospheric conditions at our elevation, but conditions down there are completely different. Thermal layers stack differently. Wind moves in patterns that don't match what instruments measure up here." She turned notebook pages filled with hand-drawn atmospheric diagrams. Rodriguez studied her observations while comparing them to the official weather forecasts that had been provided with the mission briefing. The electronic data showed favorable conditions for long-range shooting, but Elena's field observations indicated atmospheric challenges that would make accurate targeting extremely difficult. "How confident are you in this analysis?" he asked, recognizing that mission success might depend entirely on her environmental predictions. "Confident enough to stake the mission on it," Elena replied without hesitation. She closed her notebook and began preparing her gear for immediate deployment. "The atmospheric window we need will open tomorrow morning at approximately 0630 hours and last for maybe 20 minutes. After that, thermal distortion will make accurate shooting impossible until late evening." She secured her environmental documentation in waterproof containers designed to protect critical information under field conditions. Mission briefing occurred at 0500 hours in the Tactical Operations Center, where maps covered every available wall surface and communication equipment hummed with encrypted traffic from higher command levels. Colonel Martinez outlined the operational parameters, while intelligence officers provided target information that had been gathered through multiple surveillance methods over the previous 2 weeks. The high-value target was a regional commander whose capture or elimination would significantly disrupt enemy operations throughout the sector. His movement patterns had been tracked to a specific mountain pass, where topographical features created a natural choke point. Electronic surveillance systems had identified the optimal interdiction point, but atmospheric conditions were preventing reliable target confirmation and range calculation. Weather reports show optimal shooting conditions, the intelligence officer explained, displaying electronic forecasts on the briefing room's main screen. Minimal wind, clear visibility, stable atmospheric pressure. Electronic systems indicate this should be a straightforward long-range engagement. He clicked through slides showing satellite imagery and digital weather data that supported the mission timing. Elena raised her hand and requested permission to present alternative environmental analysis based on direct field observations. Colonel Martinez nodded, recognizing her reputation for environmental expertise that had been documented in training reports and previous operational assessments. She moved to the front of the briefing room with her notebook and began explaining atmospheric conditions that electronic systems couldn't measure accurately. The valley creates thermal inversion layers that distort visibility and affect bullet trajectory, she said, using a laser pointer to highlight topographical features on the projected map. Electronic weather systems measure atmospheric conditions at our elevation, but conditions in the target zone are completely different. Thermal layers, wind patterns, humidity levels all change dramatically between our position and the interdiction point. She opened her notebook and displayed hand-drawn atmospheric diagrams that showed how mountain topography created unique weather patterns throughout different times of day. Her observations indicated that electronic forecasts were measuring the wrong atmospheric data for their specific mission requirements. Accurate shooting would require environmental analysis based on direct observation rather than electronic measurement. Colonel Martinez studied Elena's environmental documentation while comparing it to the official weather reports that had guided mission planning. The contradiction between electronic forecasts and field observations created tactical complexity that required immediate resolution. "What are you recommending, Specialist?" he asked, acknowledging that operational decisions might need to be adjusted based on her environmental analysis. "We adjust timing and approach based on actual atmospheric conditions rather than electronic predictions," Elena responded. The optimal shooting window occurs 30 minutes earlier than planned, with a much shorter duration than electronic systems indicate. After that window closes, atmospheric distortion will prevent accurate targeting until conditions change again in the evening. She provided specific timing recommendations based on systematic environmental observation. The briefing continued for another hour, while tactical officers incorporated Elena's environmental analysis into operational planning. Mission timing was adjusted to accommodate atmospheric conditions that had been identified through direct field observation rather than electronic measurement. Elena's environmental expertise had become integral to mission success in ways that standard training programs didn't typically anticipate. Advanced positioning began immediately after the briefing concluded. Elena and Rodriguez moved to the forward observation post with equipment that included both electronic surveillance systems and manual observation tools that functioned reliably when atmospheric conditions challenged technological capabilities. Their position provided direct line of sight to the target zone while offering concealment from enemy surveillance. The observation post was established in a rocky outcrop that provided natural camouflage and stable shooting positions. Elena began immediate environmental assessment, using methods that combined electronic data with direct atmospheric observation. Wind patterns, thermal layer development, humidity changes that affected visibility and bullet trajectory. Systematic analysis that would determine shooting solutions when the target appeared. Rodriguez established communication links with tactical operations, while Elena continued environmental monitoring throughout the afternoon and evening. Her observations confirmed the atmospheric patterns she had predicted, with thermal inversion layers developing exactly as her notebook had indicated. Electronic weather systems continued to provide data that didn't match observed conditions in the target zone. Night brought temperature changes that affected atmospheric stability in ways that electronic systems couldn't measure accurately. Elena documented thermal layer behavior using observation techniques that provided information essential for mission success. Her notebook filled with environmental data that would guide shooting decisions when the target became available. Pre-dawn preparation began at 0400 hours, when Elena and Rodriguez conducted final equipment checks and reviewed environmental analysis that would determine their approach to the mission. Atmospheric conditions were developing exactly as Elena's observations had predicted, with thermal layers forming patterns that would create both challenges and opportunities for accurate long-range shooting. Thermal inversion is building on schedule, Elena reported, studying atmospheric behavior through high-powered optics that revealed distortion patterns invisible to electronic sensors. We'll have approximately 18 minutes of stable shooting conditions starting at 0627 hours. After that, atmospheric distortion will make accurate targeting impossible. She adjusted her rifle's scope settings based on environmental factors rather than electronic recommendations. Rodriguez confirmed communication links with tactical operations and verified that mission timing had been adjusted to accommodate Elena's environmental analysis. Their approach would depend entirely on atmospheric conditions that had been predicted through direct field observation rather than electronic measurement. Success required precision timing that matched natural atmospheric cycles. The target zone remained quiet as dawn approached. Electronic surveillance systems continued monitoring enemy movement while Elena tracked atmospheric development that would determine shooting opportunities. Her environmental analysis had identified the exact time window when conditions would allow accurate long-range engagement, but that window would be brief and couldn't be extended through technological means. At 0615 hours, Elena began final environmental assessment using observation techniques that provided real-time atmospheric information. Thermal layers were organizing exactly as her predictions had indicated. Wind patterns were stabilizing into configurations that would support accurate bullet trajectory. Humidity levels were creating atmospheric conditions that would allow clear target identification through optical systems. Environmental window opening in 8 minutes, Elena reported, maintaining constant observation of atmospheric behavior that would determine shooting solutions. Thermal distortion is clearing from the bottom up. Wind patterns are stabilizing. Visibility in the target zone is improving rapidly. She made final adjustments to her rifle's scope based on atmospheric conditions rather than electronic recommendations. Rodriguez maintained observation through spotting optics while monitoring communication channels for target movement reports. Electronic surveillance systems had detected movement in the approach corridor, indicating the target was following predicted routes that would bring him into the interdiction zone during Elena's atmospheric window. Mission timing was aligning exactly as environmental analysis had predicted. At 0623 hours, the target appeared in the approach corridor exactly as intelligence reports had indicated. Electronic surveillance confirmed target identification, while Elena maintained environmental monitoring that would determine shooting solutions. Atmospheric conditions were continuing to develop according to her predictions, with thermal distortion clearing from the target zone on schedule. Target confirmed, Rodriguez reported through communication systems while maintaining spotting scope observation. Range to target, 1,247 meters. Moving southeast along predicted route. Estimated time in optimal shooting position, 14 minutes. He adjusted spotting scope settings while Elena continued atmospheric assessment that would guide targeting decisions. Elena studied atmospheric conditions through her rifle scope while tracking target movement that would determine shot timing. Thermal layers were clearing exactly as her environmental analysis had predicted, creating shooting opportunities that wouldn't exist without precise understanding of natural atmospheric cycles. Her preparation was about to be tested under operational conditions that required both environmental expertise and exceptional marksmanship. At 0627 hours, atmospheric conditions reached optimal parameters for long-range engagement. Thermal distortion had cleared from the target zone. Wind patterns had stabilized into configurations that would support accurate bullet trajectory. Visibility was clear enough for precise target identification through optical systems. Elena's environmental analysis had predicted this exact moment when natural conditions would allow mission success. Environmental window is open, Elena reported while settling into her final shooting position. Atmospheric conditions optimal for engagement. Wind minimal and consistent. Thermal distortion cleared. Target zone visibility excellent. She aligned her rifle scope with targeting solutions based on environmental factors rather than electronic recommendations. The target moved into the optimal interdiction position at 0629 hours, following routes that placed him exactly where intelligence reports had predicted. Elena's environmental window was open and would remain stable for approximately 15 more minutes before atmospheric conditions changed again. Mission success required immediate action based on environmental analysis that had guided their entire approach. Rodriguez confirmed target identification through spotting optics, while Elena prepared for the shot that would demonstrate the effectiveness of environmental analysis under operational conditions. Her rifle was positioned according to atmospheric factors that had been predicted through systematic field observation. Shooting solutions were based on environmental data that electronic systems couldn't provide accurately. Target acquired, Elena reported, while maintaining precise scope alignment with targeting solutions based on her environmental analysis. Range confirmed at 1,247 meters. Wind call, 3/4 value from 10 o'clock. Atmospheric conditions stable within predicted parameters. She controlled her breathing while preparing for engagement that would validate weeks of environmental preparation. The shot sequence began with environmental confirmation that conditions remained optimal for accurate long-range engagement. Elena verified atmospheric stability through direct observation while maintaining target acquisition through her rifle scope. Rodriguez provided spotting support through high-powered optics while monitoring communication channels for any changes in operational requirements. At 0631 hours, Elena made the shot that ended the mission successfully. The bullet traveled 1,247 meters through atmospheric conditions that had been predicted and analyzed through systematic environmental observation. Target engagement was confirmed through multiple observation systems while Elena maintained shooting position according to operational security protocols. Target down, Rodriguez reported through communication systems while maintaining observation of the engagement zone through spotting optics. Shot placement confirmed. Mission accomplished. Electronic surveillance systems verified target elimination while Elena secured her rifle according to post-engagement procedures that maintained operational security. Mission completion was confirmed at 0633 hours, when electronic surveillance verified that the target had been successfully eliminated through long-range precision engagement. Elena's environmental analysis had provided the atmospheric information necessary for accurate shooting under conditions that electronic systems couldn't measure reliably. Her systematic field observation had been essential for mission success. Extraction began immediately after mission completion, with Elena and Rodriguez following predetermined routes that provided concealment from enemy response forces. Their equipment was secured according to operational protocols, while communication systems coordinated extraction timing with tactical operations. Mission success had been achieved through environmental expertise that complemented traditional military capabilities. After-action assessment occurred at the forward operating base where Elena's environmental analysis methods were reviewed by tactical officers who recognized the importance of systematic atmospheric observation for operational planning. Her notebook contained environmental data that had been essential for mission success under challenging atmospheric conditions. Colonel Martinez conducted personal debriefing sessions that acknowledged Elena's environmental expertise as mission-critical capability that enhanced traditional military effectiveness. Her systematic approach to atmospheric analysis had provided information that electronic systems couldn't measure accurately, demonstrating the value of direct field observation for operational planning. Your environmental analysis was the difference between mission success and failure, Colonel Martinez said during Elena's individual debriefing session. Electronic systems provided data that would have resulted in missed shots and operational failure. Your field observations provided the accurate environmental information we needed for successful target engagement. He made detailed notes about Elena's methods for future operational reference. The debriefing continued with technical discussion about Elena's environmental analysis techniques and their application for future operational planning. Her systematic approach to atmospheric observation had proven effective under challenging conditions that electronic systems couldn't handle reliably. Mission success had validated environmental expertise as essential military capability. Rodriguez received recognition for his spotting effectiveness and tactical support during the mission. His coordination with Elena's environmental analysis had contributed to operational success under challenging atmospheric conditions. Their teamwork had demonstrated the effectiveness of combining environmental expertise with traditional military skills. Elena's mission performance was documented in operational reports that acknowledged environmental analysis as critical capability for future military planning. Her systematic approach to atmospheric observation had provided information essential for mission success when electronic systems couldn't function reliably. Environmental expertise had become operational necessity rather than supplementary capability. 2 weeks later, Elena received orders assigning her to the Special Operations Training Center, where her environmental analysis methods would be incorporated into advanced tactical training programs. Her systematic approach to atmospheric observation had been identified as essential skill that enhanced operational effectiveness under challenging environmental conditions. The training assignment included responsibility for developing curriculum that taught environmental analysis techniques to special operations personnel who faced similar atmospheric challenges during high-priority missions. Elena's field-tested methods would become standard instruction for operators who required environmental expertise for mission success. Rodriguez also received advanced assignment orders that recognized his spotting effectiveness and tactical coordination during challenging operational conditions. His ability to work effectively with Elena's environmental analysis had contributed to mission success that validated new approaches to operational planning under adverse atmospheric conditions. Elena's environmental notebook became reference material for developing training programs that taught systematic atmospheric observation to military personnel operating in challenging environmental conditions. Her field-tested methods provided proven techniques for environmental analysis when electronic systems encountered limitations or provided unreliable data. The operational success achieved through Elena's environmental expertise had demonstrated the importance of systematic atmospheric observation for military effectiveness. Her methods had proven essential for mission success under conditions that challenged traditional technological approaches to environmental assessment. Training program development began immediately, with Elena providing technical expertise for curriculum that would teach environmental analysis techniques to special operations personnel. Her systematic approach to atmospheric observation would become standard military training that enhanced operational effectiveness under challenging environmental conditions. Elena's transition to instructor duties involved developing training materials that documented her environmental analysis methods for systematic instruction. Her field-tested techniques would be taught to military personnel who required environmental expertise for operational success under adverse atmospheric conditions that challenged electronic measurement systems. The training center assignment provided opportunities for Elena to refine her environmental analysis methods, while teaching systematic atmospheric observation to students who faced similar operational challenges. Her expertise had evolved from individual capability to institutional knowledge that enhanced military effectiveness under challenging environmental conditions. Curriculum development included both classroom instruction and field training that taught systematic environmental observation through practical application. Elena's methods were integrated into comprehensive training programs that prepared military personnel for operations under atmospheric conditions that electronic systems couldn't measure accurately. Student evaluation demonstrated the effectiveness of Elena's environmental analysis techniques for operational planning under challenging atmospheric conditions. Military personnel who completed her training program showed improved performance during exercises that simulated adverse environmental conditions similar to those Elena had encountered during operational assignments. Elena's instructional methods emphasized systematic observation techniques that functioned reliably when electronic systems provided conflicting or inadequate environmental data. Her training programs prepared military personnel to assess atmospheric conditions through direct field observation that complemented technological capabilities. Advanced training modules included environmental analysis techniques for various geographical regions and atmospheric conditions that military personnel might encounter during operational assignments. Elena's systematic approach provided comprehensive environmental assessment capabilities that enhanced operational effectiveness under diverse challenging conditions. The training programs developed under Elena's supervision became standard military instruction that prepared personnel for environmental challenges that required systematic atmospheric observation. Her field-tested methods provided proven techniques for environmental analysis that enhanced operational success under adverse conditions. Elena's expertise continued evolving through constant refinement of environmental analysis techniques and instruction methods that prepared military personnel for challenging operational conditions. Her systematic approach to atmospheric observation had become essential military capability that enhanced effectiveness under diverse environmental challenges. Years later, Elena's environmental analysis methods were being used by military personnel in operational theaters around the world, where challenging atmospheric conditions required systematic observation techniques that functioned reliably when electronic systems encountered limitations. Her training programs had prepared thousands of military personnel for environmental challenges that determined operational success or failure. The institutional impact of Elena's environmental expertise extended far beyond individual mission success to comprehensive enhancement of military capabilities under challenging atmospheric conditions. Her systematic approach to environmental analysis had become standard military training that prepared personnel for operational effectiveness under diverse adverse conditions. Elena's legacy in military environmental analysis continued through ongoing refinement of training programs that taught systematic atmospheric observation to new generations of military personnel. Her field-tested methods provided proven foundation for environmental expertise that enhanced operational effectiveness under challenging conditions that electronic systems couldn't handle reliably. The effectiveness of Elena's environmental analysis techniques had been demonstrated through operational success under challenging atmospheric conditions that would have defeated approaches relying solely on electronic measurement systems. Her systematic field observation methods had proven essential for military effectiveness when technological solutions encountered natural limitations. Military personnel trained in Elena's environmental analysis methods carried her systematic observation techniques to operational assignments around the world, where challenging atmospheric conditions required expertise that complemented technological capabilities. Her influence on military environmental assessment had become permanent enhancement to operational effectiveness under adverse conditions. Elena's contribution to military environmental analysis represented fundamental advancement in operational capabilities that prepared personnel for challenging atmospheric conditions through systematic observation techniques. Her field-tested methods had become institutional knowledge that enhanced military effectiveness under diverse environmental challenges that determined mission success or failure. The training programs Elena developed continued producing military personnel with environmental analysis capabilities that enhanced operational effectiveness under challenging atmospheric conditions. Her systematic approach to environmental observation had become essential military training that prepared personnel for situations where electronic systems provided inadequate or unreliable environmental data. Elena's environmental analysis methods had proven their effectiveness through operational success under challenging atmospheric conditions that required systematic field observation rather than reliance on electronic measurement systems. Her training programs prepared military personnel for environmental challenges that determined the difference between mission success and failure under adverse conditions. The institutional impact of Elena's environmental expertise continued through ongoing application of her systematic observation techniques by military personnel operating under challenging atmospheric conditions around the world. Her methods had become standard military capability that enhanced operational effectiveness when environmental challenges exceeded the limitations of electronic measurement systems. Elena's legacy in military environmental analysis represented permanent enhancement to operational capabilities that prepared personnel for challenging atmospheric conditions through proven, systematic observation techniques. Her field-tested methods had become essential military training that enhanced effectiveness under diverse environmental challenges that electronic systems couldn't handle reliably. The communication came through encrypted channels at 2,347 hours on a night when intelligence reports were painting an increasingly dangerous picture across multiple sectors. Elena was reviewing advanced training curricula in her office at the Special Operations Center when the priority message arrived with classification levels that indicated immediate deployment requirements. The atmospheric analysis techniques she had been teaching were about to face their ultimate test under conditions that would determine far more than individual mission success. Commander Sarah Chen knocked once before entering with a folder containing operational details that carried the weight of strategic implications. Her expression reflected the gravity of information that would reshape Elena's understanding of how environmental expertise could influence broader military outcomes. "We have a situation developing," she said, settling into the chair across from Elena's desk. "Multiple high-value targets, extended range requirements, weather conditions that are defeating every electronic system we have available." Elena closed her training manual and gave Commander Chen her complete attention. The operational parameters being described represented challenges that exceeded anything she had encountered during previous assignments. Electronic surveillance systems were failing across entire geographical regions due to atmospheric phenomena that standard military technology couldn't analyze or predict accurately. The target zone covers approximately 40 square kilometers of mountainous terrain that creates its own weather patterns, Chen continued, spreading satellite imagery across Elena's desk. Intelligence indicates coordinated enemy activity involving leadership elements from 3 separate organizations. Traditional surveillance methods aren't providing reliable information because atmospheric interference is preventing accurate observation and communication. Elena studied the topographical features while processing the implications of what Chen was describing. The geographical area represented environmental challenges that would require systematic atmospheric analysis on a scale she had never attempted. Mountain ranges that created multiple microclimates, valleys that channeled wind patterns in unpredictable directions, elevation changes that affected thermal air behavior in complex ways. Electronic systems are reading atmospheric conditions that don't match ground truth, Chen explained, pointing to weather reports that showed conflicting data from multiple measurement stations. Thermal imaging is compromised across the entire area. Communication systems are experiencing interference that prevents coordination between units. Traditional spotting methods aren't working because visibility changes constantly. Elena pulled her environmental analysis materials from secure storage and began reviewing systematic observation techniques that might be applicable to the scale of operations Chen was describing. Her field-tested methods had proven effective for individual missions, but the scope of environmental challenges being outlined required comprehensive atmospheric assessment that exceeded previous requirements. The operational window is extremely limited, Chen continued, with information that added temporal pressure to the environmental complexity. Intelligence indicates the targets will be present in the area for less than 72 hours before dispersing to locations that will make future interdiction impossible. We need environmental analysis that can provide accurate atmospheric information for multiple simultaneous operations across challenging terrain. Elena considered the implications while reviewing her systematic observation techniques for potential application to large-scale operations. The environmental challenges described would require coordination between multiple teams operating under different atmospheric conditions that changed continuously throughout the geographical area. Her individual expertise would need to be scaled into comprehensive environmental support for complex operations. How many teams are we talking about? Elena asked, recognizing that mission success would depend on providing environmental analysis to multiple units operating simultaneously under diverse atmospheric conditions. The coordination requirements would exceed anything she had managed during previous assignments. 8 sniper teams positioned at different elevations and geographical locations, Chen replied with details that outlined the operational complexity. Each team faces unique atmospheric challenges that require specific environmental analysis. Electronic systems can't provide reliable data for any of the positions. Mission success depends entirely on accurate environmental assessment that accounts for local conditions at each operational site. Elena opened her notebook and began sketching preliminary environmental analysis frameworks that might accommodate the operational requirements Chen was describing. Multiple teams would need individualized atmospheric assessment while maintaining coordination that ensured simultaneous operations succeeded under diverse environmental conditions. The challenge represented fundamental expansion of her systematic observation techniques. When do we deploy? Elena asked, understanding that preparation time would be limited while environmental complexity required extensive analysis. The scale of operations would demand immediate application of techniques that had been developed through months of systematic field observation under less challenging conditions. Wheels up in 6 hours, Chen responded with timing that eliminated extended preparation opportunities. You'll have advanced elements providing preliminary environmental data, but final atmospheric analysis for each position will depend on your direct assessment upon arrival. Mission success requires environmental expertise that electronic systems can't provide. Elena began immediate preparation for deployment that would test her environmental analysis capabilities under operational conditions far more complex than previous assignments. Her systematic observation techniques would need to function reliably while providing atmospheric information for multiple teams operating simultaneously under diverse challenging conditions. Equipment preparation included both electronic monitoring devices and manual observation tools that functioned reliably when atmospheric conditions challenged technological capabilities. Elena's field gear was organized to support comprehensive environmental analysis while maintaining mobility requirements for operations across challenging mountainous terrain. Advanced briefing materials provided topographical information and intelligence assessments that outlined the environmental challenges each team would face during simultaneous operations. Elena studied geographical features while developing preliminary atmospheric analysis frameworks that could be adapted to specific conditions encountered at each operational position. Transportation to the operational area occurred through multiple aircraft that delivered teams to staging areas positioned around the perimeter of the target zone. Elena accompanied the command element that would coordinate operations while providing environmental analysis support to teams operating at different locations throughout the challenging geographical area. The staging area was established in terrain that provided communication capability with multiple team positions while offering Elena access to observation points that allowed comprehensive atmospheric assessment. Her initial environmental analysis would guide deployment decisions that determined operational success under conditions that electronic systems couldn't measure accurately. Preliminary atmospheric observation began immediately upon arrival at the staging area. Elena used systematic observation techniques to assess environmental conditions throughout the target zone while developing atmospheric analysis that would guide individual team operations. The geographical complexity exceeded her previous experience while demanding immediate application of proven environmental assessment methods. Mountain terrain created multiple atmospheric zones that behaved independently of broader weather patterns. Elena documented thermal layer variations, wind pattern differences, and humidity fluctuations that affected visibility and ballistic calculations across different elevations and geographical positions. Her environmental analysis would determine shooting solutions for teams operating under diverse atmospheric conditions. Team positioning occurred throughout the first day as units moved to operational sites that had been selected based on Elena's preliminary environmental assessment. Each position faced unique atmospheric challenges that required individualized environmental analysis while maintaining coordination that ensured simultaneous operations would succeed under optimal conditions. Elena established communication links with each team while providing initial environmental data that guided equipment preparation and shooting position selection. Her systematic observation techniques were being applied across multiple operational sites simultaneously while maintaining comprehensive atmospheric assessment that accounted for local conditions at each position. Night brought temperature changes that affected atmospheric stability throughout the target zone in ways that required continuous environmental monitoring. Elena documented thermal layer behavior across multiple elevation zones while tracking atmospheric developments that would determine operational timing for all teams simultaneously. The first operational challenge emerged when Team Alpha reported atmospheric conditions that differed significantly from electronic weather forecasts. Elena's environmental analysis had predicted thermal inversion effects at their elevation, but electronic systems continued providing data that didn't match observed conditions. Mission success required immediate atmospheric assessment that provided accurate environmental information. Team Alpha, this is environmental control, Elena transmitted through encrypted communication channels. Disregard electronic atmospheric data. Local thermal inversion is creating conditions that will affect visibility and ballistic calculations. Stand by for updated environmental analysis based on direct observation. She began systematic assessment of atmospheric conditions specific to Team Alpha's position. Elena's environmental analysis for Team Alpha included thermal layer mapping, wind pattern assessment, and visibility calculations based on direct atmospheric observation rather than electronic measurement. Her systematic techniques provided environmental information that guided shooting solutions under conditions that electronic systems couldn't analyze accurately. Team Bravo encountered different atmospheric challenges that required separate environmental analysis accounting for their specific geographical position and elevation. Elena provided individualized atmospheric assessment while maintaining comprehensive environmental monitoring that ensured coordination between multiple teams operating under diverse conditions. The operational complexity required continuous environmental analysis that provided real-time atmospheric information to teams facing changing conditions throughout the target zone. Elena's systematic observation techniques were being tested under operational demands that exceeded previous mission requirements while maintaining accuracy essential for mission success. Team Charlie reported equipment malfunctions that prevented electronic atmospheric measurement at their position. Elena's environmental analysis became their primary source of atmospheric information for shooting solutions under conditions that would have defeated operations relying solely on electronic systems. Her systematic field observation provided essential environmental data. Team Charlie, environmental control has your atmospheric data, Elena transmitted while providing environmental analysis based on systematic observation of conditions at their specific position. Thermal layers are unstable at your elevation. Optimal shooting window will occur between 0545 and 0610 hours. Wind patterns will shift during that period, requiring continuous adjustment. Elena's comprehensive environmental analysis covered atmospheric conditions across all 8 team positions, while providing individualized environmental data that accounted for local conditions at each operational site. Her systematic observation techniques were functioning as primary environmental assessment for complex operations under challenging atmospheric conditions. Team Delta encountered visibility challenges that electronic systems couldn't assess accurately. Elena's environmental analysis provided atmospheric information that guided their approach to target acquisition under conditions that required systematic field observation rather than electronic measurement. Her expertise had become essential for operational effectiveness across multiple positions. The second day brought atmospheric developments that confirmed Elena's environmental predictions, while demonstrating the accuracy of systematic observation techniques under challenging operational conditions. Teams reported environmental conditions that matched her atmospheric analysis, while electronic systems continued providing data that didn't correspond to ground truth. All teams, this is environmental control, Elena transmitted through communication channels that connected her with all operational positions simultaneously. Atmospheric conditions are developing according to predicted patterns. Thermal inversion effects will peak between 0530 and 0630 hours. Wind patterns will stabilize during that period, providing optimal conditions for simultaneous operations. Elena's environmental analysis had identified the atmospheric window when conditions throughout the target zone would allow coordinated operations by all teams simultaneously. Her systematic observation techniques had provided comprehensive environmental assessment that guided timing decisions for complex operations under challenging conditions. Team Echo reported target movement that required immediate environmental analysis for shooting solutions under changing atmospheric conditions. Elena provided real-time environmental data that guided their engagement decisions while maintaining comprehensive atmospheric monitoring for all positions simultaneously. Team Echo, wind conditions at your position are shifting to 4 o'clock at 8 knots. Thermal layers are clearing from your target zone. Optimal engagement window opens in 7 minutes and will last approximately 12 minutes before atmospheric distortion increases again, Elena transmitted while providing environmental analysis essential for mission success. The coordination requirements demanded continuous environmental analysis that provided atmospheric information to multiple teams operating under diverse conditions that changed throughout the operational period. Elena's systematic observation techniques were functioning as comprehensive environmental support for complex operations that exceeded previous mission scope. Team Foxtrot encountered electronic system failures that eliminated their technological environmental assessment capability. Elena's environmental analysis became their exclusive source of atmospheric information for shooting solutions under conditions that would have prevented operations without systematic field observation, providing essential environmental data. Team Foxtrot, environmental control is your primary atmospheric source, Elena transmitted while providing environmental analysis that guided their operational approach. Electronic systems are experiencing interference at your position. Environmental conditions require manual atmospheric assessment. Stand by for continuous environmental updates based on direct observation. Elena's environmental expertise had become mission-critical capability that enabled operations under atmospheric conditions that defeated electronic measurement systems. Her systematic observation techniques provided environmental information essential for mission success when technological approaches encountered natural limitations that prevented accurate atmospheric assessment. Team Golf reported improved visibility that confirmed Elena's atmospheric predictions while validating systematic observation techniques under operational conditions. Their successful target acquisition demonstrated the accuracy of environmental analysis based on direct field observation rather than electronic measurement systems. Environmental control, Team Golf reports optimal atmospheric conditions at predicted time. Target acquired. Environmental analysis was accurate. Engaging on schedule came the transmission that confirmed Elena's environmental assessment had provided essential information for operational success under challenging atmospheric conditions. Team Hotel encountered the most challenging atmospheric conditions in the operational area, but Elena's environmental analysis had prepared them for thermal distortion effects that would have prevented accurate shooting without systematic atmospheric assessment. Her environmental expertise enabled operations under conditions that electronic systems couldn't analyze effectively. The final operational phase required coordinated simultaneous engagement by all teams under atmospheric conditions that Elena's environmental analysis had identified as optimal for mission success. Her systematic observation techniques had provided comprehensive environmental assessment that enabled complex operations under challenging conditions. All teams, this is environmental control. Atmospheric window is opening, thermal conditions optimal, wind patterns stable, visibility clearing throughout target zone. Execute simultaneous operations. Environmental conditions will remain favorable for 14 minutes, Elena transmitted with environmental analysis that guided mission success. The coordinated operations succeeded under atmospheric conditions that Elena's environmental expertise had predicted and analyzed through systematic field observation. All teams achieved successful target engagement during the atmospheric window. Her environmental analysis had identified as optimal for mission success under challenging conditions. Mission completion confirmed the effectiveness of Elena's environmental analysis techniques for complex operations under atmospheric conditions that electronic systems couldn't assess accurately. Her systematic observation methods had provided environmental information essential for coordinated success under challenging conditions that would have defeated operations relying solely on technological measurement. After-action assessment acknowledged Elena's environmental expertise as mission-critical capability that enabled complex operations under atmospheric conditions that exceeded the limitations of electronic measurement systems. Her systematic observation techniques had provided comprehensive environmental analysis essential for mission success under challenging conditions. Your environmental analysis was the foundation for this operation's success, Commander Chen said during Elena's individual debriefing. Electronic systems failed across the entire operational area, but your systematic observation techniques provided the atmospheric information that made coordinated operations possible under impossible conditions. The debriefing continued with comprehensive review of Elena's environmental analysis methods and their effectiveness for complex operations under challenging atmospheric conditions. Her systematic techniques had proven essential for mission success when electronic systems encountered limitations that would have prevented coordinated operations. Elena's environmental expertise had evolved from individual capability to comprehensive operational support that enabled complex missions under atmospheric conditions that challenged traditional technological approaches. Her systematic observation techniques had become institutional capability that enhanced military effectiveness under diverse, challenging conditions. Recognition for Elena's environmental analysis contributions included assignment to the Strategic Operations Division, where her systematic observation techniques would be integrated into advanced operational planning for missions requiring environmental expertise under challenging atmospheric conditions that electronic systems couldn't assess accurately. The strategic assignment provided opportunities for Elena to develop environmental analysis capabilities for large-scale operations, while teaching systematic observation techniques to personnel responsible for complex missions under challenging atmospheric conditions. Her expertise had become essential military capability for strategic operations. Elena's environmental analysis methods were incorporated into comprehensive training programs that prepared military personnel for complex operations under atmospheric conditions that required systematic field observation rather than reliance on electronic measurement systems. Her techniques had become standard military training for strategic operations. Advanced curriculum development included environmental analysis techniques for various operational scenarios and geographical conditions that military personnel might encounter during strategic assignments. Elena's systematic approach provided comprehensive environmental assessment capabilities that enhanced operational effectiveness under diverse, challenging atmospheric conditions. The training programs Elena supervised produced military personnel with environmental analysis capabilities essential for complex operations under challenging atmospheric conditions. Her systematic observation techniques had become fundamental military training that prepared personnel for strategic missions requiring environmental expertise. Elena's legacy in military environmental analysis represented permanent advancement in operational capabilities that prepared personnel for complex missions under challenging atmospheric conditions through proven, systematic observation techniques. Her methods had become essential military capability that enhanced strategic effectiveness under adverse environmental conditions. Years later, Elena's environmental analysis techniques were being applied to strategic operations around the world, where challenging atmospheric conditions required systematic observation methods that functioned reliably when electronic systems encountered natural limitations. Her training programs had prepared military personnel for environmental challenges that determined strategic success. The institutional impact of Elena's environmental expertise continued, through ongoing application of her systematic observation techniques by military personnel, conducting strategic operations under challenging atmospheric conditions globally. Her methods had become permanent enhancement to military capabilities under diverse environmental challenges. Elena's contribution to military environmental analysis represented fundamental advancement in strategic operational capabilities that prepared personnel for challenging atmospheric conditions through systematic observation techniques. Her field-tested methods had become institutional knowledge that enhanced military effectiveness under conditions that electronic systems couldn't handle reliably. Military personnel trained in Elena's environmental analysis methods carried her systematic observation techniques to strategic assignments around the world, where challenging atmospheric conditions required expertise that complemented technological capabilities. Her influence on military environmental assessment had become permanent foundation for strategic operational effectiveness. The effectiveness of Elena's environmental analysis techniques had been demonstrated through strategic operational success under challenging atmospheric conditions that would have defeated approaches relying solely on electronic measurement systems. Her systematic field observation methods had proven essential for military effectiveness when technological solutions encountered limitations. Elena's environmental analysis methods continued enhancing military capabilities through ongoing refinement of systematic observation techniques that prepared personnel for strategic operations under challenging atmospheric conditions. Her expertise had become essential foundation for military effectiveness under diverse environmental challenges that determined strategic success or failure. The training programs Elena developed continued producing military personnel with environmental analysis capabilities that enhanced strategic operational effectiveness under challenging atmospheric conditions. Her systematic approach to environmental observation had become fundamental military training that prepared personnel for complex missions requiring environmental expertise. Elena's environmental expertise had proven its strategic value through operational success under challenging atmospheric conditions that required systematic field observation rather than reliance on electronic measurement systems. Her training programs prepared military personnel for environmental challenges that determined the difference between strategic success and failure. The institutional impact of Elena's environmental analysis continued through ongoing application of her systematic observation techniques by military personnel conducting strategic operations under challenging atmospheric conditions worldwide. Her methods had become standard military capability that enhanced strategic effectiveness when environmental challenges exceeded electronic system limitations. Elena's legacy in military environmental analysis represented permanent enhancement to strategic operational capabilities that prepared personnel for challenging atmospheric conditions through proven systematic observation techniques. Her field-tested methods had become essential military training that enhanced effectiveness under diverse environmental challenges that electronic systems couldn't assess reliably. The strategic impact of Elena's environmental expertise extended beyond individual operational success to comprehensive enhancement of military capabilities under challenging atmospheric conditions. Her systematic approach to environmental analysis had become fundamental military training that prepared personnel for strategic effectiveness under adverse conditions that determined mission outcomes. Elena's methods had transformed military environmental analysis from supplementary capability to essential strategic competency that enhanced operational effectiveness under challenging atmospheric conditions requiring systematic field observation. Her techniques had become permanent foundation for military success when environmental factors determine strategic outcomes under adverse conditions. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. TS and trusting their instincts. The AN/PVS-10 day-night scope was struggling to maintain target acquisition through the atmospheric interference.